Welcome into part 3 of our series that we're calling Money Mondays, where we're tackling your money questions to try to give wise and biblical and counsel towards the money issues that we all battle. If you missed either one of the first parts of our series, in part 1 we tackled what does it look like to get out of debt and also to begin to start budgeting. And then part 2 we tackled money in their different stages of life. Today in part 3 we're going to tackle how do we make wise purchasing decisions. I'm joined again today by Jared Nelson, a financial advisor and coach of over 20 years who's just been so helpful to so many people. And so, Jared, first question as we think about purchasing, right? We purchase through plastic, don't we? At least that's what so many people do. So let's tackle this question. What kind of credit card is a good idea, and is a credit card, can it even be a good idea?
Yeah, great question. And credit cards are dangerous. It is definitely something dangerous. I know when I got out of school, when I graduated, I had over $10,000 in credit card debt. I learned how bad they were, how long I was going to be in debt. I paid them off, and I stopped using them. I actually took my credit cards out of my wallet and put them in a Ziploc freezer bag, filled it half full of water, and stuck them in the freezer and froze them. That way I wouldn't have a Best Buy emergency. Literally, if I was going to buy something at Best Buy, I had to go home and thaw that thing out in the sink to get to it. And even though I was teaching people finance at the time, I still did not trust myself enough to use them. And so sometimes you got to be drastic to get rid of them and to not use them. Okay, so fast forward 10 years, I started to trust myself. I had an emergency fund built up. We'd been saving. We had no credit card debt. We were, using our debit card. Well, it got to be there was just a hassle factor. When we used our debit card, sometimes we would travel, or even sometimes local. The debit card, somebody would use a swipe machine or something, and then it would come straight out of our checking account if fraud happened. And then we'd have to order new checks, and it just got to be the hassle factor of using a debit card. So I did a test. I said, okay, at the time I was married 10 years after school, and I said, hey, let's use credit cards for 90 days, make sure we can keep them paid off. And so the type of credit card to use would be one that you can pay off every single month. And I wouldn't even, if you're new to using credit cards, you're been using your debit card, I would say keep using your debit card. But if it gets to a point where fraud happens or you're worried about any of that and you're going to use your credit card, pay it off every month, maybe even sooner than that. If you get paid every 2 weeks, don't wait till the end of the month. Don't wait till you have one paycheck coming in. Every 2 weeks, get on there, pay that thing off. And just make it to be where you cannot have a balance. It just makes it hurts your stomach to have a balance. And so the interest rate shouldn't matter if you're paying it off every month. Whether it's 0% or 10% or 20%, paying it off every month means it's 0%. You want to make sure you have one with no fees, and I would be careful using the ones that you're using them for a certain reason, like miles, for instance, because we tend to use and spend more when we're trying to accumulate some goodie, and they know that. The psychology that these companies use against us is dangerous. And so I think maybe using it so that when you use it, you can pay it off, just the convenience factor. If it gets stolen, fraud or something, that credit card company will cancel it, send you another one in a week. But make sure that you're paying it off, again, at least every month, probably sooner than that would be the kind that I would use.
Great insight on credit card, and I know that's something that so many people battle with credit card debt. So if I find myself in credit card debt, is it ever okay to pull from my retirement account to try to pay off a credit card debt?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me that before. That's a great question because they say, hey, my retirement is earning 8%, 10%. My credit card's charging me 20%, 22%. So shouldn't I pull it out and pay that off? And the answer is no. And there's several reasons why. One, if you pull out of a retirement account before you're 59 and a half, you get a 10% penalty on it, plus you're going to have to pay taxes. So I've seen a lot of times where people lose literally 30 to 40%. So to get out $10,000, you're going to have to pull out way more than that, potentially $14,000, $15,000 out of it. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is what's called the time value of money. That $15,000 that you pulled out of your retirement account and you paid penalties and fees on it, now it's no longer sitting there earning interest and growing and compounding and doubling over the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. And pulling even that amount out, $10,000 out, could literally cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to not be in your retirement account down the road. And so paying that credit card off, yeah, hey, I want to get it paid off. Yeah, I've got money in my retirement account, but most people probably wouldn't do that if it was going to cost them $450,000 of their retirement. And so I would not recommend doing that.
Wow, great insight into some of the ramifications you don't even think about when you make that instant decision. Great thoughts. I know so many people have found themselves in credit card debt and trying to figure out how to get out, or what does that look like to wisely handle purchasing through plastic, as we like to say. Perhaps the biggest purchasing decision that we all make at some point is a house. And so talk a little bit about, is it ever good to rent versus purchase? Maybe there's some people out there today trying to figure out, what do I do? I'm looking for a place to stay, but renting versus purchasing, talk about that.
Yeah, great question. And I think a lot of people have heard, you don't want to rent your house forever. Even myths like you're throwing money away. So I should take the same money I'm spending on rent and use that to buy a home, so I'll be building equity. And the danger of that is people are a lot of times just looking at the principal and interest payment of the mortgage. They're not accounting for taxes and insurance, and they're not accounting for you now own the home. So when the dishwasher breaks or the refrigerator breaks or the roof needs to be replaced, that's not some owner of the rental property that's going to be doing that. That's you. And so you definitely, I think there's some kind of foundational things you need to have first. One is a 3 to 6 month emergency fund before you consider buying a home. Secondly, there's this thing called PMI, private mortgage insurance. It protects the bank if you default, and until you have 20% of the equity built up in your home. Sometimes it's a little bit more than that depending on how the loan is structured, but roughly 20%. They charge you this extra premium, and so in cases like that, buying a home can be, even you think that rent's $800 a month, the mortgage payment's $800 a month, it's going to be a lot more than $800 a month. And so if you don't have an emergency fund, also Murphy's Law kicks in, things go wrong. When you've got that emergency fund built up, when you have enough money to be able to put 20% down on a home to avoid PMI, and you get a fixed rate mortgage, then okay, maybe it's time to rent. As long as, again, you've got the cash reserves built up for when things go wrong.
So maybe we do arrive at that place, somebody does arrive at that place where they're ready to make the purchase rather than to rent, they are going to take on a mortgage. What are some things that people should be looking for and be mindful of when it comes to taking on a mortgage?
Yeah, great question. And so, just echoing what I said earlier, having a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, making sure you can put at least 20% down on it, making sure you account for things like the taxes and insurance, not just the principal and interest portion, are all hugely important. And knowing that you're going to have extra expenses. There's going to be a lot of times things that renters don't have. Could be yard upkeep, could be appliances that wear out, could be roof. If you're in a flood area or potential flood area, you have to buy something extra on top of homeowner's insurance called flood insurance. So there's all those kind of factors. Then when you actually go to purchase the home and you get a mortgage, one of the things to watch out for is the big signs outside of banks that have the low interest rate flashing by. Well, there's a difference between interest rate and APR. Interest rate is the number on the sign, 3%, 2.5. APR is the actual percentage rate, the annual percentage rate, once they add all the fees into it. And so a good rule of thumb is that if you're looking at a mortgage and you do a mortgage application and they come back with you, your interest rate, they'll quote you on the front end, the APR will be in the paperwork that you sign. The closer those two numbers are, the APR and the interest rate, the less the fees are. And so if they're a half a point apart, 3 to 3.5, getting them even closer, maybe 1/4%, something like that, gets your fees down. Lastly, I would also get a fixed rate mortgage. Adjustable rate mortgages, a lot of that was kind of out of the industry. They were almost outlawed, not completely in '08, but now they're coming back. And so a lot of people will get these mortgages and the banks will ask them, how much can you afford? And they'll either get an interest-only mortgage or an adjustable rate mortgage. And the adjustable rate mortgages, the danger of those is, if it's like a 5-year adjustable rate mortgage, after 5 years, your interest rate is going to go up. And right now, interest rates are all-time lows. So if you get a great rate at 3, but then it can go up to 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then 7, and you're only 7 or 8 years into it, that could make the payment go up 30%, 40%, and put a pretty big hurt on somebody's budget. So you want to get a fixed rate mortgage that can't go up during the term of the loan.
One of the other large purchasing decisions that we always think through, and you're going to maybe make it a few different times in your life, is, man, I really need that new truck, right? Or I really need that vehicle, that SUV. What is some counsel and advice towards maybe how much should I be prepared to put down in a down payment on a vehicle? Should I be prepared to pay for it in full? What is some counsel on that?
Yeah, well, the best down payment to put on a vehicle is 100%, to pay cash for it. And my advice would be, if you can't pay cash for a vehicle, buy a later model, maybe 2 or 3 year older vehicle with 30, 40, maybe even 50,000 miles on it. Because when you buy a brand new car and drive it off the lot, it dramatically depreciates in value. I remember another mistake I made in college. They had this deal at a dealership here locally where if you could prove you just had a diploma from the last 6 months or could show you were about to graduate in the next 6 months, they would finance a vehicle for you, no money down, no payments for 18 months, and then finance it for 6 years after that. You know, I'm a college graduate, I deserve a car. And so I signed all the paperwork, didn't even look at the interest rates. And I remember when I sold that car a few years ago, I was 5-6 years into it, I was upside down on it. I had to write a pretty big check to sell the car. And so again, they depreciate very quickly. But if you instead buy a 2 or 3 year old used car, new to you, but used one, a lot of that depreciation's gone, and you can spend, you know, $15,000 buying really a $30,000, $40,000 car. That's a great car that's going to last a long, 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 long time. Okay, now we know though that you're going to need another vehicle at some point. So if you can pay cash for a car, as soon as you do, go on and pay yourself a car payment every month. You know, $300 a month, $400 a month, and put that aside towards your next vehicle. That way, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when you want another vehicle, well, you've got your paid off vehicle that probably hasn't depreciated that much, plus all the savings, and you can get a great deal, even if you're going to buy a new one, when you buy a vehicle and can pay cash. The gimmick of 0% financing, it's still a higher price than if you pay cash and for a new vehicle. And so by doing it that way, buy a used car for a period of time, pay yourself a car payment, then you can get to a point where you can actually pay cash for new vehicles and keep them for a few years and then get another one, but always be paying cash.
Such counter-cultural thinking in so many ways, but yet so much freedom when you can learn to walk in it. And thanks again for joining us for part of our Money Monday series as we talk about how to make wise purchasing decisions. Hopefully you've got questions, and if you've got questions, we want to try to help you just as Jared has helped us today. And so if you have financial questions, if you'll text the word money, M-O-N-E-Y, to 601-397-6111, that'll allow us to connect you with not only some free resources, but also some wise counsel from a financial coach or advisor just like Jared. We'd love to help you as you wrestle through your money matters in your life. Hey, don't forget to join us for part 4 of our series as we talk about how to live a generous life, how to take what God has given to us and to live in generosity. Thanks again for being a part of our Money Monday series.